Welcome to the Feature Film Podcast.
And it's Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Feature Film Podcast, guys. I'm Kyler.
I'm Michael.
And yeah, we're talking about Tenet. We went and saw an early access screening for it at Studio Movie Grill. And I can honestly say I was left speechless.
I can agree with that wholeheartedly.
And so, with that in mind, if you have not seen this movie yet and you're listening to this podcast, stop now. Turn back, abort mission, try again later.
Huge disclaimer.
We're spoiling everything. Don't listen to it if you don't want it spoiled. This is your final warning. Okay? Okay. So, Tenet moves. There is not a slow part in that movie.
There's really not. There's really not, yeah.
Which is great because you don't with something as confusing as the content of the movie can be, you don't need a whole lot of exposition to get it moving in the first place.
And to give you a little bit of background, this movie is from the producers of Inception, so y'all kind of see what you're in for with just that alone.
Oh yeah, Chris Nolan directed this. I bet, I don't remember. I probably should look it up. Let's look it up if he wrote it. Yes, so from Wikipedia at least, Tenet was written and directed by Chris Nolan. And yeah, if you've seen Inception, if you've watched The Dark Knight, if you have seen Interstellar or Dunkirk, you know that Chris Nolan is into this kind of trippy content that bends your mind.
Yeah, he's kind of notorious for that.
Bends cinema. There's a lot to process in this movie going into it. If you ever see the trailer for it, there's this big, like amphitheater room where a concert's about to take place, and in the trailer you see a whole bunch of men in armor. It looks like SWAT or some kind of military, combing through the aisles of this amphitheater filled with people, and it looks like that's the end of the movie, and it's not. This movie goes from 0 to 100 in an instant. It opens with this scene of a concert being invaded by a police force, a rogue police force. Oh no, it's like a terrorist cell, and then the police come in to stop it, and then you see the main character dressed as police, and they go do something completely different.
You know what? I don't think that I ever caught his name. Did you? I don't think they ever introduced him. Like, other than him, I never caught his name.
Holy crap.
That's like something that we like, or you like to do, is like his name was introduced, or he was introduced into the movie at this point. I seriously don't think he has a name, like, as far as the movie goes.
Oh my gosh, I can't remember them ever saying his name.
Okay, now I gotta look that up.
They had to be.
Yeah, he has to have a name.
When he meets Robert Pattinson, he has to have a name. Robert Pattinson, being his sidekick, when he talked to him, he introduced himself. Didn't he have a name?
I don't.
My goodness.
They're so secretive about this stuff, because it's like, this is like more secretive than the Secret Service, like what we know to be the Secret Service. So, I mean, even if I know that Robert Pattinson had a name, right. I'm pretty sure he did, because he called it out at the very end too. Right. But I never
Neil or Nolan or something.
Yeah, something like that. And I don't know. I can't get.
I will say for anyone who's listening, you do need to go into it.
So his name is Robert Pattinson's name is Neil.
Okay.
And so technically, the main guy, which his real name is John David Washington. He is called the protagonist.
Oh man, really?
So that's his name, but they never necessarily
name
say that.
Him.
Yeah.
Well, they say it because he gets called the protagonist throughout the film.
But they don't address that as his name. It's just like he is the protagonist, not versus like as a
he's not a person.
Yeah, it's not possessive.
He's not a person. He's just it.
Mm-hmm.
That is something like going into the movie. from here on out, when I go see this movie again, or I rent it or buy it or whatever, and I'm going to buy it, but like going into it from now on, I'm gonna have a mindset of there is no, like, for example, Inception had a very defined story. Like, you knew what you were getting into when you saw the movie. Once you're in a few minutes of the movie, the rest of the movie and how it's going to go forward is explained pretty straightforward. In Inception, they say, like, okay, you can extract an idea, but can you plant one?
Yeah.
And that's the point of the movie. And then they even go into, okay, how many levels of dreams do you have to go down to plant an idea? And they lay out the plan for you.
Yeah, there's a
easily.
There's a
roadmap.
I'll say there's a premise for this all, and like they introduce it immediately, almost immediately.
Right, and that's how you keep track of the story in that film. This film, you can't go into it expecting that.
No.
And it's best if you don't try to find a pattern to the story necessarily.
Yeah, I made that
You
mistake.
find it along the way, or it finds you. So so goes the movie. Because the whole point of the movie being like time being inverted. Oh gosh, that like bends my mind.
So when I first saw the trailer for Tenet, I saw the scene where they are first introduced. They're first informed about the inverse objects, or they called it inverse radiation when they were explaining it.
Right.
So I saw the scene where he goes to that school.
A bullet.
Yeah, where he goes to the school or the university or whatever, and he meets with a lady, and she's got a piece of rubble, concrete or something that's just down a gun range, and she tells him to pick up the gun, and he says,
She says, aim it and pull the trigger.
Yeah, he said it's empty, and she said, just aim.
Aim and pull the trigger.
Yeah,
and so he does,
and the bullet comes flying back into the gun, and the shell that's scattered amongst many other shells, and he looks at
back into the gun.
Yeah, and he said,
"There's no bullet at first, and then there's a bullet in the magazine after he fires the gun."
And so I don't know if he necessarily takes the bullet out, or if she does, but I want to say that she does, because she has it in her hand, and she's got that glove on, I guess, to protect her from the radiation, just so any contamination or anything. And she it's on the table, and she opens her hand, and it pops right back up into her hand, because it's going through inverse radiation, inverse time. I can't remember what they call it. It was temporal something.
Well, what you're thinking of is a certain maneuver that they do for planning a two-way attack on one thing to accomplish a goal.
Gotcha, yeah.
Like a temporal pincer move.
There we go.
Is what they called
it
that's later.
What it was.
But what she talked about, I'm thankful you brought this up, because I love that scene, because that very easily lays out what you're going to see for the rest of the movie.
Exactly.
And what to expect. And she, even as she is messing with the inverted bullet and like it's moving her around in a way.
Yeah.
Once she starts messing with it, she explains, "Don't try to understand it, just feel it."
And those exact words.
And at that point I was like, "Good job, Chris Nolan. You just gave everybody an out from trying to get this movie."
Oh yeah.
And I mean, that's smart, I guess. It's like, if you try too hard to understand this, it's like with any other time movie. Every time travel movie has a breaking point.
Yeah.
Right? And so, like, if you watch Avengers Endgame, Paul Rudd, when he's trying to explain how, time travel works, he's talking to the Hulk, and he's like, "Yeah, so when I go back in time, I don't talk to myself, I don't touch myself, otherwise I'm warping time," right? And the Hulk explains, "No, that's not right. Where are you getting that from? Back to the Future?" And he explains a different way of time travel. And I mean, everyone has their own way of doing it, but at some point you just have to say, don't try to understand it.
Yeah, it's too complex for the mind.
What was that thing that you brought up The grandfather paradox.
So yeah, the grandfather paradox.
This was brought up in the movie.
Yeah, so they introduced it in the movie, and I've known about the grandfather paradox for a while, but never seen it implemented or talked about seriously in any movie or talk show, whatever the case may be. Never seen it, and it was a decent part of the movie because the grandfather paradox is, and it states, I am born, I create a time machine, I go into the past, I kill my grandfather. Therefore, my father can't be born. Therefore, I can't be born. So then I don't create the time machine. I can't go into the past. My father's alive. Sorry, my grandfather's alive. My father's born, and I am born. And then it starts to cycle over, and that's why it's called a paradox, because there's no solution.
Right. And they tried to address that, and they even, at one point, the villain in the movie, Sator, or whatever his name
Sator.
was, he explains at some point he explains why he's trying to essentially bring Armageddon by bringing future time through the past and essentially destroying everything. Because in the future, someone figured out how to reverse flow of time, and they did it because we screwed up the climate.
Mm-hmm.
Florida's underwater at that point, practically. Because we screwed up, they reversed time so that now they're going through the past but still living life, and all of their problems climate-wise are going away, and they actually have a better world to live in. And that's why the future has created inversion, and he tries to explain how at some point future and past will slip past each other, essentially, and one will become the other.
He said that when they were in the present, which I guess is technically in the future for this movie, he said that the future is more dominant, so the future is going to take over, versus because if they're two combating forces, so the future and the past, and how you say they slip by and one's going to take over. Robert Pattinson, or Neil, he said that because he's got a master's in physics or something like that. He said that the future is going to be the dominant force.
See, when I heard that conversation, I thought he said that the past would be the dominant force, but I guess that wouldn't make sense for the movie. I will say, the movie is confusing, but you get that when you go to a Chris Nolan film. But
100%.
Thankfully, the audio that is necessary to be heard to understand what the main points of what's happening, that's clear.
Mm-hmm.
It sometimes the sound design, how they've made the movie feel, kind of overtakes a little bit of the dialogue, but thankfully the important dialogue is left alone.
Mm-hmm.
It's left where you can understand, and where confusing stuff is cleared up more so you can still follow the story. And so that's a big plus. I was going to say something else and I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, that's good because I've got something. So in the last pod that we did, it was the Dark Knight, we talked heavily about sound design. So Ethan brought up the ambient drone, and you brought up something from Joker with Joaquin Phoenix. How
the guns?
Yeah, the crack. Mm-hmm. I cannot tell you, because the initial one that you got in the movie, in the Tenet, my bad, was when they're in that amphitheater. Yeah. And everything's going so perfect, blah blah blah.
The band is warming up.
Yeah, and then the director
maestro taps his baton on the music stand,
and he raises it, and just as he's about to drop it, boom! And I kid you not, my heart jumped out of my chest.
Like, for sure.
I'm good at keeping my body, like my external, in check, but I can never prevent my heart from jumping out of my chest. that got me so good. And throughout the rest of the movie, the entire movie, those gunfire, the punches, you heard everything. It was very, the only way that I know how to describe it is crisp. Like,
oh yeah,
the crack of the firing of the bullet, the punch on a what do you call it?
On a body.
The Kevlar vests.
Yeah.
All of that stuff. It was so crisp.
I think it was pretty the basic notes from that were pretty overwhelming.
Yes.
When it came from most sound effects, but you're right, when it started, you're expecting to hear this nice string, orchestra, and all you hear is this crack from an assault rifle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very, oh man, I'm telling you,
it's
0
jarring.
to 100.
It's jarring 100%.
This movie goes 0 to 100 immediately.
I don't even think the parameters of 0 to 100 even fit this movie. It's so much more than that.
It's like, when it's like you're carrying a football on the football field. You're running for the end zone, and you start running so fast your feet start coming out from under you, and then you start tripping, but you're still carrying the ball forward. That's what this movie feels like, where you feel like you're about to fall on your face, but your feet just barely keep you up. I will say this movie, because it deals with time, it starts with that assault at the amphitheater looking for a piece of this device that has an algorithm that, has, can end the world or something like that. And
I don't think I quite caught. So I know that she said that there's 8 or I think she said 9.
There were
9 pieces of the algorithm, and that's what they were talking about this entire movie. So was the algorithm that those 9 pieces of metal? That's what it shows at the end of the movie. Spoiler. But those 9 pieces of metal or devices, that was specifically intended to end the world, right or wrong?
It was supposed to release an algorithm that allowed plutonium to explode or something. That's where it gets kind of fuzzy.
Yeah.
Because it's a spy movie, and you get that feel immediately, and you know that this is a spy movie just from how it goes. But because they have to, they say it's an algorithm that is basically the key to some kind of nuclear holocaust or something. But because this movie is so trippy in the first place, you can't have something like an algorithm that's anamorphous, no, it doesn't have a physical form. You can't have that be the bad guy.
Yeah, no.
It has to be something physical that you can see. And so I guess they kind of associated the algorithm with those different devices that all connected together, that you see at the end. But what I'm interested in, because of how the movie plays, you start at the amphitheater and the orchestra, you move forward past that, and you're getting hints of Tenet, throughout this opening sequence. You see a little bit of time reversal in this opening sequence, but as you go forward in the movie, you're getting more and more trippy as it goes. You're seeing more and more reversed things, and you're thinking, is this some kind of power or ability, or what is this? And then you finally figure out, oh, the future's coming back at the present. And then you get to this point in the movie, which I would consider the midpoint in the movie, but almost, oh man, I can't even understand timeline-wise in that world where that was. But once they get to the point of the bad guy shooting his wife in reverse.
Okay.
In the chamber.
Yeah, so when they start to basically go back in time.
When they start reversing the events of the movie.
Yes, exactly. So
it's like they reached the end of time,
this is
reversed, and came back and played through the movie.
There's there's a setup that I was introduced to somewhere in English class or something, and it's just like a story setup, so where it's called It Comes Full Circle. So this is the weirdest version of coming full circle that I have ever experienced.
But, whenever he steps through that time chamber, let's call it a time chamber for lack of a better term. Once he steps through that time chamber, you know, then the movie's events start playing back the way you've seen them, just from the other perspective.
Exactly.
Which is crazy and awesome at the same time. But here's the thing. You're playing through these events you've already seen, and then you get to a point where you haven't seen it, and they do this whole side mission where they're trying to get the 9 pieces of the algorithm device, save them from, disconnect them, separate them, save them from releasing that algorithm to the world and destroying the universe as we know it. You get to this point where you're watching that. That's the end of the movie. That is the climax of the movie. But the problem is that is in their timeline essentially, I guess we could call it the midpoint of the of their timeline, because in the movie you never see it get back to the orchestra.
Yeah, no, so it never goes back to the very beginning. So that's why I said it was a very weird version of coming full circle, because it came mostly full circle, not all the way. And another big thing that I was going to bring up was that how you said like the midpoint where they start going back in time, retracing the steps of the movie. There was one point in the movie when we were experiencing it for the first time. So it was present at this time. Where they, both Robert Pattinson and John, and so Neil and the protagonist,
we'll call him Pro for short.
Pro, cool. So they were going through the airport, which was doubling as a like high security storage system,
like Switzerland,
exactly,
but just in Russia or somewhere.
Yeah,
Oslo.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's Russia, but whatever.
So they were fighting this full suit of armor. They could not see a face. The glass that the person was looking out of was completely blacked out, so you couldn't see any eyes, no skin, anything. And both Neil and Pro were fighting this guy. So my bad. They were each fighting their own bad guy.
Right.
And it shows Pro fighting the most of the time. And then it shows Neil go down this hallway. He slams up against a wall, and this hallway is L-shaped, so you can't see around the corner. So when Neil slams up against the wall, he grabs this guy that he's fighting and throws him down the hallway, the part that you can't see. And as he's doing that, he's ripping off the helmet and the face mask of this guy. And he gets this dumbfounded look. And then it cuts back to Pro fighting
his soldier.
Yeah, his soldier. And immediately, I thought to myself, that's got to be him in the future. Not Neil, but Pro. But it's movie theater. You don't want to say anything too loud. Except for when you're with a group of 4 other friends, maybe. However, it got to the point where they started backtracking and tracing back all those steps. And I was so happy that I was right, because it showed that Pro was the guy in that armor that you couldn't see. So basically, Pro was fighting himself, and Robert Pattinson was fighting Pro. But when he ripped off the helmet, he saw that it was Pro, threw his helmet back, and went to go help Pro of past time.
What's so trippy about that, when you think about Pro fighting himself on either way?
Yes.
What's trippy is that he's fighting the same consciousness.
Yes.
And both people are seeing the other person as inverted.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so confused at how that must feel whenever they're both, like, at one point, Pro in the past, we'll call him Past Pro.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Past Pro. Past Pro has a pistol pointing at Future Pro. Future Pro knocks the pistol out of his hand, and it skids down the hall on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Later, when you're watching this happen from Future Pro's perspective, you see Past Pro invert and grab the gun out of the air as it comes back towards him on the floor, and it jumps up to him.
Yeah, just reverse physics.
And they keep like fighting each other and shooting each other. And I was just thinking, that must feel so weird to know, like, I felt this before, but in a different way.
So, me taking a break from necessarily the craziness of this film and paying my homage to the creators.
I thought you were about to say vintage cars again.
There was really nice cars in there from my
favorite car from that go.
I couldn't figure out what car it was, but as they're just going into the airport and Neil is in the car, it kind of goes past 3 parked cars in front of the airport. The one that's red and is in the middle. Somebody out there, please tell me what it is if you know. It was the nicest car out of the entire movie. But I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Oh, paying homage. Okay, so going back to paying homage to the film creators and just the pure cinematography of this film, the reverse scenes were both mind-boggling, but it was the bread and butter of this film. It was amazing. Like, if I didn't know any better, I would say that Peter McKinnon filmed them.
Shout out to Peter McKinnon. I do want to say that according to Yahoo, Tenet had most of the action scenes that Nolan made for Tenet were actually done practically and without visual effects. So, like,
that's crazy.
The actors had to act in reverse. Think about that. Like, go back to the midpoint in the timeline where, Sater just reverse shot his wife, and then he walked through the machine and he went back to go get the device that was dropped in the car chase.
Yes.
He's going back and there's a gunfight out on the highway. He's walking through gunfire, and because it's all inverted, bullets are flying back past him.
Yes.
Glass is rebuilding itself.
Trippy.
And he's... Like, think about that. When they did that, they had to shoot him acting in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
Everything had to be blowing... Like, all the glass had to be blowing forward in time.
And he would have to be
moving reversed.
Yeah.
Because in the movie, it had to look like he was moving forward through reversed time.
And the only reason that I think that can be so complicated is because I've watched the videos of people speaking English in reverse, but in real time. So there's a method to it, and there's several people that can actually do it. So they record themselves speaking in reverse, and then they take that audio and play the audio in reverse, and it sounds like they're speaking forward in real time.
That's so trippy.
So imagine that, but applying that to your entire body versus your mouth and vocal cords.
And I will say, like, whenever we went through the first time machine, the time chamber, and, Pro was going, he was inverting, at that point, he comes out and they say, take a minute, orient yourself, because it's going to be really weird.
Yes.
And you can see him, I noticed, like, when he started jogging, it was like his body was, like, he was making his body move like it was almost reversed running, but forward.
Yeah.
And just to give this effect of, I am backwards now.
Yes.
Which was really, really good.
I loved the scene when he was trying
to see that.
When he was trying to orient himself, and he steps in the puddle, but the puddle is going in reverse.
Oh,
so
gosh. The puddle splashes him.
Yeah, basically the puddle splashes him. So he lifts up his leg because he is technically, like, he himself is still going forward, but he's in reverse time.
Yeah.
So he's stepping, and as he's lifting his leg, you see that there's the droplets that are supposed to be coming off the bottom of his foot are coming up to meet his foot so they can push them back down because it's going in reverse. It's so trippy.
Congratulations, Christopher Nolan.
Yes.
You have broken my mind.
Mine too.
I do want to point out the fact that I have no doubt in my mind that Christopher Nolan was actually given the okay to crash an actual plane through an actual building. He was, like last podcast, I
flipping
said, like,
a semi.
He flipped a semi, and they said, he went to the producers and said, "Hey, I want to flip a semi."
Cool.
And they said, "Okay."
Yeah.
And then he said, "Hey, I want to blow up a building," and they said, "Okay" for The Dark Knight. And
smash a Lamborghini.
Yeah. And I have full faith that he went to the producers and said, "Hey, I want to drive a plane into a building. Can we do that?" Sure, we'll make money off of that.
Oh, my goodness.
Gosh, he's got to be, in a way, one of the most powerful men in the world. He makes such great films. He could get away with whatever he wants when it comes to that kind of thing.
He gives the child's mind prominence, I guess, is the word for that.
I do need to voice this. I have no clue where he gets his ideas from. Like, think about it. Planting ideas in your head while you're dreaming. Reversing the flow of time and moving through it like with your forward consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Having, I've not seen Interstellar, but I've heard it's like a, string theory in practicality.
It's a very odd movie as well.
And I'm just thinking, where in the world and how does Chris Nolan come up with these ideas? I'm going to say this, and it's a hot take. I think he's this generation's George Lucas.
I am currently doing the what's the guy sitting on the toilet like
the
this?
Thinker.
The Thinker. There we go. I'm currently doing the Thinker.
On a toilet? That's a famous statue.
I know. Okay, there's a. I'll explain after the pod. I'll explain. That can go to the bloopers. No, what I was gonna.
Are you wondering why I'm thinking this?
No, that I'm not wondering. That's just like it's a good statement. Like it's a good. Is it called the Ponder?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that when it comes to, if you imagine George Lucas, remember what he did with Star Wars, he created visual effects that hadn't existed.
Yeah.
He built a camera just to get the shots that he needed. Not him, but his company. And thinking about how Chris Nolan is benefiting from George Lucas's genius, but he's creating content that people might have explored this kind of stuff in movies before, but never to this effect, where it's so realistic and so trippingly mind-bending. To build a movie and a world where you can enter people's dreams and share them and then do whatever you want in that. I mean, it is... I'm pretty speechless when it comes to this. I just think with how much he is able to do with his genius of filmmaking in itself, he's able to come up with ways to do these practical effects, reversing time and all that. Granted, he didn't reverse time in real life, but I mean, just thinking of how to plan this movie out, that's my opinion. He's this generation's George Lucas. He's genius.
So I've got a question for you.
Shoot.
What was your favorite part of this film? Like your favorite scene?
Oh, man.
If you had to pick one and one only.
Oh, crap. One scene only from this movie that is my absolute favorite.
And it can be for any reason, not necessarily just like the style of film, okay, or just like oh, that was really cool.
Okay. Golly. That's difficult. I'm going to go with the scene where Pro enters the time chamber for the first time, exits, and then goes on a car chase inverted.
So, funny enough, mine is just at the end. My favorite part is just at the end of what you just named. So my favorite part, and it seems so silly, but I mean, it's the truth. He got hypothermia for being lit on fire in an explosion. He got hypothermia from that because the
atmosphere, because everything's inverted.
Yeah, so you don't burn, you freeze.
Yeah.
And how mind-boggling that is for us, You touch fire, you get burnt. But in reverse, you touch fire, you get frozen.
Think about how attentive to detail Nolan was in this, that whenever they step through the time machine, and because the thing is, while we're watching it point of view of the person going forward through backwards time, essentially in reality, it's someone going backwards through forwards time.
Yeah.
That's what it really is.
That hurts my brain.
I know. But he paid so much attention to detail that he thought down to the level of respirating, where if I breathe backwards, it doesn't work, because
you're taking in
CO2 rather than oxygen, and so you're essentially depleting your body of what it needs. And so he put in the fact that you have to have an oxygen tank, your own oxygen, to survive at all times, unless you're in a sealed inverted environment or something like that. And I know that's kind of where the story breaks down. Is where, like, oh, if I step into this sealed off room with this specific kind of bubble, or not bubble, but like plastic.
It's like the stuff you'd see off of E.T. when they go into those like surgical rooms, or those secret agent rooms. I know not secret agent, but
secret organization room where
and it's got those clear plastic zips. The entire room is just full of them.
Just clear plastic for sanitary reasons.
Yeah,
they're sectioning off stuff in E.T., but in this movie they're doing it to seal out the reversed air.
Yeah, so it's like pockets of the future if you think about it.
That, and essentially, like, that's what. Of course, they had to do that because you can't, have dialogue with an oxygen mask on. But it further breaks down later when, at the end, where the wife kills the husband because she's on the yacht without an oxygen tank and she's inverted.
Yes.
Or wait. Okay, hold on. We missed a step. Okay, so Pro and Neil and Kate, the wife, all went through the first inversion chamber.
Yes.
Then they went to Oslo right after the plane crash. That's when future Pro and past Pro had their fight, right? The second time, technically.
Yes, because that's when they introduced that the guy in all of that armor was Pro in the future.
Right. But they specifically went there because they realized that was an inversion chamber.
Yes, that was the next one that they needed.
Because they needed to be in past time going forward again. Therefore, that's why they were able to. That's why they took Kate.
Yes, because
to go through the inversion chamber, so she didn't have to breathe with an oxygen mask. Wow, I missed a step.
They did that so that they could fix her bullet wound.
Right, but in the process of doing that,
they also prevented her from having to have that.
All three of them.
Oxygen. Yes,
so that they could all three be back in the past again and still move forward and save the future and past, and basically all time flows through the protagonist and we just move around him. That's what it is.
If you think that this podcast is confusing, wait until you see the movie.
Goodness gracious. I will say the movie does a great job of moving you through the story, point to point, keeping you informed of the main things so that you realize, oh, this is what's going on, so this makes sense in the story. It does a good job of doing that. It's just when it gets down to the nitty-gritty of the actual physics of everything, that's when it gets confusing and your mind breaks. But wow, what an amazing movie.
I concur. Wholeheartedly, and I know I said that already, but it's the truth. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Great movie. If you're not into your mind exploding, don't go watch this. If you've already watched this and you're not into that stuff, I'm sorry for you.
Yeah, if you listen to this whole podcast and we just spoiled the movie for you, if we turned you off to it, please don't be turned off to it. Go see it. It's such a worth it ride. Just go into it with the expectation of it's a spy movie. There's a lot of other stuff going on. I'm in a spy world. I'm watching two people in the midst of something bigger.
Yes.
And just follow it with that thought in your head. But, yeah. Is that it? Are we done?
Pretty sure I got everything that I wanted to mention out.
I'm pretty chatted out.
Yeah, I think so. I think
all right.
you too.
Well, guys, if you've seen it, chat with us on social media and tell us what you thought of Tenet. And be on the lookout for our next podcast coming up. It's going to be a special one about Red Relic Productions' our own shorts films that we've done. Anxiety and soon to be Happy Place. If you want to check that out, be on the lookout for that. Give us a review on iTunes and follow us everywhere on social media except for Twitter, because Twitter's a dumpster fire.
And Kyler actually kind of just let y'all on to a little spoiler alert there. We're eventually going to do About the Creator films, so be on the lookout for that in the future too.
True. Yeah, we are. Just
that'll be a little bit further ahead, but definitely keep an eye out for that because that's coming as well.
Yeah, and that's just about us and why we're together doing this, and kind of just about our lives if you want to get to know us. So be on the lookout for that, and cool. So
bye.
Roll credits.